Welcome to Tooth Podcast. I'm your host, Hany Rambod, and we are back. This is, I guess, a new season because we took a long break. So it's been a really good little break for me from doing some podcasts for a while. And I got a special guest here that was with all of us at the Florida gym opening for the new Raw gym. And we have Iain, none other than Iain Bayer. Dude, tell me how you do. People still say Valeri when they do that?
I get everything. Yeah, I mean, I'll get anything from Valerie to whatever it is. I mean, every rendition there is, I've heard of it. I mean, it's funny though. I actually get my first name because of there's the extra I in there. Yeah, I probably get that messed up more than my last name. The last name people will get but it's like, okay, you're pretty close, but I'll get Lane or Iain or like anything Iain or Iain or Lane, like whatever, any weird variation of that I get all the time. Yeah.
When I'm in the Middle East, they say to me, they go, "Oh, when are you going to do a workout video with Iain?" They got, yeah. I'm like, who's that? Who's that?
Those kind of ones with my first name I get all the time. People are so used to just seeing the IAN Ian that I think when they see that extra one in there, their brains just like melt and they don't know how to pronounce a 4-letter word. So that's probably the most common one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. But we've been talking about trying to do a podcast for a long time. Whenever I see you at some of these events, but it's always usually a lot of, we're at the Olympia, things are go, 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 things are nuts. But dude, how's retirement?
You know how retirement is. I mean, it's like it's an initial holiday followed by you go in waves. You know what I mean? It's like what are those like 4 stages of grief or whatever they call it? That kind of shit. It's like you go first where it's like you're kind of super happy about it and you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like I have so much time back. Like I'm not worried about eating so much. And there's this, and then you kind of get into this where like, man, there's certain things I miss and I miss this, and oh, maybe I'll do it again. And you kind of go in these waves of it. So it's good. I mean, there's parts of it I like. There's obviously, I've been a bodybuilder for my entire adult life. So there's parts of it I definitely, definitely miss of bodybuilding. Absolutely. And that are going to be inside me forever. But there's pros and cons like anything.
Is it something that you decided on just a spur of the moment, or was it something you've been contemplating for a while? Because I think everybody always wants to know what's the mentality, because most people will just continue to keep riding it till the wheels fall off. And you were, questionably at some of your best looks when you decided to kind of say, okay, I'm going to stop. I guess what was the thought process in it? Because I want people to really be able to understand where your mentality was when you decided to say, hey, look, I'm going to retire now.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a spur of the moment. It was something that had been kind of building into my mind, like up to a crescendo, and I don't, obviously looking back in hindsight, I perceive it obviously differently than I did in the moment. It's one of those things like, the best analogy I can give, it's like when you have a girlfriend, she dumps you when you're 18. It's like the biggest thing in the world. And when you look back as an adult and you're like, what was I so, like that wasn't a big deal at all. Like life goes on. But I think it was one of those things that I was putting a ton of pressure and stress on myself, and it was just one of those things. As I got older, I kind of had these thoughts of like, man, since I was 18, this is the only thing I've done. Like, is this all I'm good for? Like, I want to see if I'm good and can do other things, and as well as you get older, you have a little bit different thoughts of mortality, and when you're younger, you don't really think of those kind of things. And it's not like I ever had any health issues. I'm very lucky that I, have never had any of consequence. But, as I got older, I'm a somewhat anxious personality to begin with. So as I got older, that definitely, those thoughts became more prevalent in my mind of like, what's life going to look like for me after bodybuilding? And not like immediately, what about in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? Like what are the price I'm going to have to pay for this? And then all these things kind of came to a culmination and started to really take the joy out of, and I talked about this on an Instagram post I made the other day or last week, about training. Like it became to a point that even the thing that I started bodybuilding because of, which was the training and the love for training, I just didn't even enjoy anymore. Like just to get myself to go to the gym, and put myself through workouts or get my meals in. It felt like so much work, and not a work that like I was excited for, and a work that I was like felt like a challenge. It felt like something that I was more like scared to do. And once I got to that point, I was like, all right, I need a change here. Um, and at the time, just hanging it up felt like obviously the most immediate release from all these things that I had kind of built up, right?
When you say you were scared to do, was that because of the outcome of why you're doing it with a competition, or just was it from possibly getting hurt? When you say scared, what do you mean by that? You you said something about like you went into the gym, and I think you used the word that you were kind of like not enjoying it anymore, and I think you used the word scared to do, and I don't know if that was an intentional word or if it was you meant something else by it, or I misheard you. But was that something when you went in and you weren't having fun? Was it a scary feeling, or was it just anxiety ridden? Because I know that you and I talked about that. We talked about how anxiety and some of the points you've had in your career where that anxiety kind of kicked in at high at a very high level. But was that what you're talking about? Like every day that you were going in the gym, it just felt like it was a burden because of the anxiety level?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I guess scary is, whether I said that or not, it's kind of is the right word, because I was scared of, is this the end? Like, if I'm feeling this way, am I getting close to the end? What's on the other side of this? It's all, like I said, it's all I'd done since I was, my entire adult life was training and being a bodybuilder, so, life after that, for anyone that's been in any kind of, high level sport or anything like that, I'm sure they know what that feeling is like, thinking about what life is like after that. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was a culmination of things of, anxiety, fear, scared that I wasn't going to be as good as I wanted to anymore, and that I was, starting to see signs of decline, signs of, or fearful of the future and my long-term health, fearful of my not enjoying it anymore, and would that be gone forever? So yeah, I mean, it was a whole bunch of things that kind of came to a head for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to a point where I believe you might have touched on it on one of the times that you discussed it, which is the risk versus the reward, right? When you know that you're not going to be, you're not super genetically gifted, and you already haven't been up in the top 3 or top 5. I mean, does that have a lot to do with it? Because again, there's so many different mentalities when you think about this with competitors. Some people are in there and they're just happy to be in the top 10. Was that something where you had a goal in mind that you're like, hey, if I can't be in the top 3 or I can't be in the top 5 for a given time, that I'm going to go ahead and not risk my long-term health on it anymore? Or was it something else that you were measuring it by for that success rate, for that, if you would have maybe continued?
Yeah, I didn't have a look. I'll be honest. I completely, when I set out in bodybuilding, I didn't have like lofty goals per se. I really didn't know much about bodybuilding. I wasn't one of those guys that started into bodybuilding at a young age and like, I want to win the Mr. Olympia. It wasn't one of those things that was, prevalent in my mind as like what my goal for this was. They were all kind of, I had longer term goals, but they were all very like within my realm of reality, which could have been one of my limiting factors as well, is that I was setting them maybe a little too small. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think when I didn't think that I was going to achieve better placings than I had already achieved, and I could keep going and keep winning shows. I don't think that I'm at the point where I couldn't win shows anymore. I mean, if I want to win, Toronto Pro, Vancouver Pro, whatever, European shows, I think I could still absolutely do that. But with the crop of guys that was coming in, and like you said, when you're weighing the pros and cons of these things, I'm like, okay, is there that much more that I feel that I'm going to get out of this in terms of like a personal satisfaction? Like, am I going to go and be content with the placings that I'm getting at the Olympia versus the risk that I feel, at least that I felt I was putting on myself? So it wasn't like, no, if I'm not going to get the top 5 or this, but I know I'd placed 7th twice, and then I went down to 11th the year after that. I know it wasn't my best showing, but I also think that at my best, making 7th still would be very difficult with the crop of guys that are around right now. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of a weighing all those things. That wasn't my competitiveness wasn't really like one of the biggest thoughts in my thought process of retiring. It was part of it, I suppose. All those other factors of fears that were combined, I think were more of a dominant thing in my head. But I mean, like you said, they all kind of add up and build pressure on the whole situation. And then it starts to take joy out of the aspects that you used to enjoy. And then it all just became like, what am I even doing this for?
Right. Well, also, you come from a competitive family, right? You got Melissa who competed, and you obviously up until just recently retired. But was there also an age versus, like, I know you guys were talking about possibly having kids. Was that also something that was on the kind of like on the calendar, saying, "Hey, look, at this point, I'd really like to be able to talk about having kids"? Also, was that also a factor? Because I know health is number one, but was also procreation.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be completely, upfront and honest for the podcast. Before Toronto Pro last year, when we started to get serious about wanting to have kids, like the time felt right. I went and did a sperm analysis, and it was a big fat 0, and I'm like, man, if this isn't going to get any better while I'm still doing this, and I'm like, where, am I going to be, I compete for another 5 years, and I'm trying to deal with this when I'm 37, 38, and yeah, that was definitely one of the things that added into my, trepidations and my fear about, where's this going? Where's this, where am I seeing myself in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? So yeah, I mean, it was definitely part of the equation. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I think, more people a little bit more, it seems to me again, that they want to start families a little sooner than later because of the fear of getting your system, to restart again. And I know with Chris and Derek, they both just had kids, just recently, and being able to do that. I think that also now we're much more as coaches, because you also do some coaching a little bit, right? I mean, right, you too, but again, you think at a coach's level. I consider you a coach, okay? Whether you're not, yeah, and you have, and again, with all of the, we're going to get into the whole CBUM thing too, but at the end, what I look at is the fact that there are more people that are a little bit more aware, and I just felt like you're so aware because of the fact that you're like, look, this is what I could do. I'm not going to ride my ego, and that's what I really looked up, to your decision making, because it takes somebody really understanding of their own aura and who they are to be able to say, look, this is where I don't want to risk my health anymore, and I want to be able to step away. Very few people step away at that level. They just turn around and just wait to get hurt, wait to end up having injuries, wait till having, some different kinds of medical issues. And then they turn around and make that decision, because it's not really them making the decision, but the decision has been made for you. And that's the difficult thing.
Something I definitely spoke about, when I did stop competing, was wanting to be in control of my destiny, like in that regard. I've seen so many guys that, love bodybuilding, but then they're forced out of bodybuilding, and it creates this like bitterness, and how they look back at bodybuilding in hindsight is very tainted because of it. When I think if they had kind of made the decision earlier, and not kind of push themselves too far, that they could have looked back and, have a lot more fondness about their career and about the experiences and memories that they had in bodybuilding. And I loved my career bodybuilding, and it brought me a lot, and I'm very thankful for it. And I wanted it to keep it that way, and if I get to the point where my body is absolutely destroyed, or I, have some serious health issue happen, what does my opinion of that change in my mind going forward? So yeah, it was definitely something where I was like, okay, I could keep going here a little while, win some more shows, still compete at the Olympia, make a good living, all these things. But like we just said before, but what else does that bring me in terms of my life and in terms of what I felt I've accomplished in my career bodybuilding? And I don't think it would add to that much more in terms of, the total accolades of my career, or how I feel about it. But from the other side, I think it would definitely be taken away. Yeah. I wouldn't want something to happen potentially because I, want to push it for one more year, And then I look back on a 15 year career with a completely different lens than I did before, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess going back to the start, a lot of people don't know where you started. When you started in Canada, you started as, were you a teenager when you first competed, or were you in your early 20s?
I started at 19, competing as a junior, like what we as junior in Canada. We don't have teen like you guys have in the US, but we have a junior class. And I competed, yeah, that would be 2009, 10, and won the Canadian Junior Championships in 2010, 11. Yeah.
Okay. And then what year did you and Melissa start? Didn't you start in like high school or something?
We actually went to the same high school. We graduated the same year. We're the same age. Our birthdays are only about a week and a half apart. But we were very different social circles in school, so we didn't like, if you put a bunch of people in the lines and told me the name or told her the name, we would have known who each other were. And maybe we've been at the odd party where, social circles kind of converged there, but we definitely weren't in the same world at that point in time. We met a couple years after high school. So in 2012 is when we started hanging out through a mutual friend. So yeah, that's when it all kind of started from there.
2012. I mean, for you, it was like a long time ago. For me, it was like yesterday when we were in the middle of, getting Phil against Kai. I just think I always look at Olympias for a reference point. Whenever somebody gives me a year, I'm always looking back. So we're in the middle of it. But when you were doing that, and I guess were you the one that started talking Chris into competing? How did that whole dynamic work?
I don't recall precisely if I talked him into it. I know Chris was already training. You can see pictures of Chris when he's in, because when I met him, I think he was in the summer between his junior and senior year in high school, like grade 11 and 12 in high school. It was the summer for him between those 2 years. And he already had been training, was very strong and had a good physique. And I know that he, was into that world of training and being stronger and, athletics and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, I mean, I was around, we don't live in like the biggest city ever. There's not a ton of bodybuilders. I was that guy around here that was the bodybuilder. So, when Melissa and I started hanging out together more and I was training, and then, Chris and I kind of by proxy started, training a bit more and talking about that kind of stuff. I don't know if it was like, I was like, you should compete, or it was more, he saw me competing or saw me prepping for shows and was kind of like, I want to do this too. And him and Melissa actually prepped for their first shows together in 2014. So yeah, it was kind of everybody.
Did you help both of them or no?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. How was that? How was that?
Neither of them probably listened to a thing I told them, I can tell you. On their diets, both of them every other day. That's for sure. But no, I mean, it was good. I mean, they both looked pretty good. Their first show, they both won the overalls. Chris was young. I mean, he would have been, at 19, 2014, he's born in 95. Yeah. So he would have been 19, won the overall men's juniors, the heavyweights and the overall there. And Melissa won the figure and the figure overall. So obviously from the start, you can tell physiques like that are going to be something special for both of them,
Well, I don't think a lot of people know how good Melissa, was when she was competing. I mean, she still looks great, but I'm just saying in terms of her being genetically gifted, it's not just, the genes weren't just put on one side of the table.
She's got them in full force too. I can tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I remember she was competing and I would say, I'm like, you don't see that kind of genetics very often. And so whenever you kind of like draw your eyes to shoulder to waist and you're like, wow, yeah, she's got a really, she had a really good X frame. And I was just like, and then why did Melissa stop competing?
She stopped. She did her last show at the Arnold 2019, where she had a very, very bad showing. I think at the time she had, we had just got married in the winter of 18, and she'd done the Olympia that year and then right into a wedding. We were planning a wedding and then just right from that into the next prep. And I think she just kind of overburdened herself with that and really just didn't have a good prep. And then I think after that, she had a bad rebound and some hormonal issues, and she similar to me in that she started to get a bit of trepidations about like, what is this doing like for my long-term health or fertility or things like that. And I also don't think Melissa was someone like a lot of top tier competitors where they love the training and love the challenge. She liked aspects of it, but also a
Mm-hmm.
lot of aspects, for a girl especially, she wanted to really maintain her femininity. So she was very scared in terms of anything from the, drug side of it. Um, and, also as a competitor, when you're putting in on muscle, and you're a girl with a little more body fat in the off season, you just feel like big all the time,
Mm-hmm.
she really started to get to the point where she's like, I just really don't like how I look and how I feel, walking around in my own body, so I
Mm-hmm.
think for her, one of the things was, just not wanting to be that level of muscular anymore and be a little smaller, and just be a little more happy about how she looked. And I think she wasn't so driven by the competitive nature that she was willing to kind of forego that, for top Olympia placings.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a fair statement. I think a lot of girls that I talk to, they don't want they they don't want that level of size, and that they lose the level of comfort that would go along with having to put on that size. And they just are like, look, my wife was the same way when she won the San Francisco, NPC San Francisco in figure back then. It was like bikini is now almost. It's like a whole different look. And
Get to the next level. I mean, she won some big shows, and she's been, up in the top 15 at the Olympia. I mean, I think her best was 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that. Um, but where she just needed more muscle. She needed more the whole back half. Hamstrings, glutes, rear delts, back, everything there. She just needed more of that. And I think that the years where she started to push, the food and the training in the off season, she just feel how she felt like, being 190 pounds, like 200 pounds, because she's not short. Like Melissa's, 5'7", 5'8". So you have a girl that's, with that kind of shoulder width, plus a little muscle, plus a little body fat in the off season. It just became like a level of discomfort and dislike for how she felt and looked that I think it kind of overweighed, overpowered her desire to be a high level competitor.
yeah, the other thing I also noticed is that I do feel that with women, a little bit more than men, but I do think it happens with men as well, is that I think it can trigger eating disorders because you have that feast or famine effect. As you were coaching people back in the day, whether it was Melissa or others, did you also feel like that was also a factor that you see people that would just end up
That's
doing that?
that's exactly the was you hit the nail right on the head with that being for Melissa. I mean, and even that's something that she's had to work on post competing. It's one of those things that it's like you said, feast or famine. It's either you're eating nothing, or and if you let it go, it goes like right off the deep end. So yeah, it's definitely been something that she's had to work on and, be conscious of and be mindful of, with her eating habits. And these were definitely things that were developed in her competitive career for sure. You're dieting hard for shows, and then your next show, it's like you get one day where you feel like you can eat before the prep starts for the next show and you go crazy. And then it's, ups and downs. And that's kind of how things went. So yeah, it's definitely feast or famine is absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, and with you, I guess as you were starting to grow and you were starting to train, did you feel like you were hitting a stride right from the beginning? Because it seems like you were really growing. Like you had this really good. It wasn't like this long drawn out. Like you were pacing yourself really well. And were you working with coaches back then? I mean, what was your instance with coaching, with your personal coaching, where you were working with somebody and getting ready for your own shows, or were you using somebody?
Yeah, no, I worked with coaches basically from the first show I ever did. I mean, um, whether it was just, local guys giving me a few tips and stuff like that, right through the first real coach I started really having like full coaching, um, when I started doing my like men's open stuff like in 2013. But even before that, one of my friends, Hassan Jama, is a Canadian bodybuilder. This a local guy named Freddie, that's a guy local to the gym here, who's a trainer, was an old school bodybuilder back in the 90s. I had these guys kind of, weighing in and helping me out with, nutrition and training, stuff like that from when I was very young and even getting into bodybuilding. So, I always saw the importance, or what I felt was the importance and the benefit of having someone in my corner, to kind of take that thought process off my mind a little bit. So yeah, I've worked with a coach. I've never competed in a show, definitely professionally, without like coach's guidance. Yeah.
Out of all the coaches, I guess, do you feel like you connected? I mean, I'm sure you got some pieces from every single one, right? But do you feel like there was other pieces, whether it was training, whether it was nutrition, because you have a different viewpoint, because you were not only a competitor, top tier competitor, but you're also a coach. And so for you to be able to kind of break down coaches, and be able to do that. And I know it's a little hard because you don't want to you're trying to be nice.
No, it's not even about nice. It's you're right. And sometimes it's hard because you need to like it's just like to trust the process, just like, look, someone's got a different system. You might think something's ridiculous, but it's like, I just trust what guys do. And I really had to be like, hey, if I'm going to hire a guy, for them to, kind of steer the ship, like, I'll maybe ask questions here and there, like, hey, what's the deal with this or this and this, but I really try and not like, I don't want to pick at someone's system. If this is their system, I trust it. I hired you because I trust you, whether it's something I've done or haven't done or don't like or whatever. I can give you the feedback in terms of what I've done in the past and what's worked for me or hasn't worked for me. And we can play around with that. But I really tried not my hardest in my career to not step on the coach's toes, or, because I know, like, being a coach, when someone's questioning every fucking thing I do, I'm like, bro, like, lay off, so like, just let me do this. I know what I'm doing, Yeah. But I think having a healthy curiosity is good. And I think that's how we learn, and asking questions and kind of seeing how guys run through their process, I think, is how I learned and how other guys learn, for sure. And you kind of pick things up and, like, build your own system and see what you do and don't like. Definitely from a personal standpoint, who I worked with the longest, well, I guess between Matt and Patrick, it was pretty similar length. But a lot of
yeah. Who were your coaches? Like, so I know you worked with Matt, you worked with Patrick.
I'll start from the beginning. So after Hassan and Freddie, the local guys, then I worked with Greg Doucette.
No way. Greg
Doucette turned me pro. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Greg Doucette turned me pro, actually.
Does he have any idea what he's doing?
Look, I was back then, I don't even know if I sent him progress pictures ever, but he just we talked often. He, kind of checked in and gave me a plan. And he worked in kind of like if it fits your macro style, but not really. Like, it was very like, I was eating like P28 pizzas and protein popcorn and all that kind of stuff.
So he was doing that. He was having you do that while you were getting ready for the show.
Yeah, and I got peeled, man. Like, I was actually outrageously peeled, but it was probably because, like, I was eating these things, but my total calories were probably like 1,800 calories a day.
So you're at a deficit.
So I was at a large deficit, and I did I think I did no cardio when I worked with him. And ate very minimal calories, and I actually looked pretty good. When I was younger, it worked for me, and I definitely looked good. So I mean, it's a crazy system, that I look back on, I laugh at it, but I got nothing but bad things to say in terms of that. It definitely worked. I mean, I looked, the show the first show I did with him.
You should be getting a coupon code for Greg Doucette here, because he's going to turn around and use this.
The first show I did with him in 2013. Was probably one of my best conditions of my entire career, especially from the back. Like, my level of detail and conditioning from my back shots was probably the best I ever achieved ever. Obviously, as then I, progressed and got to the pro level, I wanted a coach that had worked with pros and got, guys at that next level, and kind of knew that scene, so then that I worked with Dennis James for my first 2 years as a pro after that. So I did my pro debut season, 2015, Orlando, Toronto, those shows I did with Dennis. So, and I really liked working with Dennis. I mean, it worked. I looked good in those shows. I enjoyed my time with him. Dennis is a character, for sure. So he's definitely fun to talk to and have in your corner and be around at shows. So I definitely enjoyed that time as well. And then as Dallas McCarver started to come more into the forefront of popularity there, that's how I kind of got introduced to Matt. You know, I saw this guy, we were about the same age. You know, it's just something about him like really like resonated with me. And so initially I was still working with Dennis, and I just hired Matt to do my training. So Dennis was doing my nutrition, prepping me for the shows, and Matt just was doing, you know, training programs for me. And then as the one contest season ended, then I was kind of like, okay, maybe I want to, you know, try working with Matt for everything, kind of, you know, put everything into one camp. So then I worked with Matt for the next, 3 years, 3 years after that. Yeah. So from 16 till 19, 19 till, so 2016 to 2019, 3 years. And then on to Patrick. Yeah.
So what was the reason for the change? Was it because you just wanted to try something that's a bit different? Because I know when you switched, then you ended up switching back again, right? Because you went to Patrick, then went back to Matt.
Yeah. So, you know, at the time, Matt and I had done a couple shows in 2019, and it felt like, and this is just how it felt at the time, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously if I could go back, you know, you think, like I was saying about the, you know, 18-year-old girlfriends, things feel so much more serious in the time than I think they were later in life. You know, and I wanted to try something different and see if there was something that could, you know, something that was missing or that I could be doing better. You know, but we had done a few shows in 19, and it was like we really hit the nail on the mark, like the nail on the head one show, and the next show we'd like miss the mark, and then we'd hit it again, and then we'd miss the mark. And it just felt like there was a bit of inconsistency in the process that we were doing, that was making me lose a little bit of like faith in the system that we were doing. It's like, you know, what we would be doing show to show. It's like, oh, I thought we kind of had it figured out, and then we're like trying to mess with it the next show. And I just got very nervous about it. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be a guy that starts to be inconsistent like that. I want to try and find a system that works for me, and we can kind of play around with and try and just improve on. So yeah, I mean, look, I think if I'd stayed with Matt, we would have figured things out and definitely, you know, continue to improve. But you know, I did a show in Spain, Portugal in 2019, and Patrick was coaching a guy there, this guy named Florian. He's a French kid, that was doing his pro debut there. He turned pro the day before, and then did his pro debut with us the next day. And he was very impressed by him. And I was very impressed by him. So I kind of checked out Patrick. I'd never really heard much of him. And, you know, I was kind of impressed with his work. And he was a guy, I think what drew me to him at the time was that I knew nothing about him, you know, and I think that was the thing. It's like, I kind of knew what was going on, you know, with the other guys in my circle. And there was this guy from Europe, you know, that's just different and doing different things, you know. It's like there's some European secret over there I don't know about, you know. So you kind of want to find out what that is, you know. And it's
so what is it? What was it? What was the European secret?
Well, I can't tell you that. Secrets of the pros, you know. So yeah, it was just a curiosity. It was just a very general, you know, intriguing curiosity about Patrick and who he was as a person and his system. And then I worked from Patrick from 2019, the second half of that season, 2019, until the last show I did, Toronto, which I went back with Matt and kind of closed out my career, you know, kind of where it started in terms of my first wins and first Olympias with Matt, and, you know, finished it back off with Matt. So.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, there's probably takeaways from everything. Do you feel like if you had to make the decision now that when you were working with Matt, that you would have just stayed there? Do you feel like it was just kind of like the grass is always greener on the other side? Because I feel that's what happens.
I definitely don't regret my decision. You know, my time with Patrick, look, I love Matt. Matt's a great friend and someone I definitely look up to, you know, from a multitude of different standpoints. But my time with Patrick is like definitely very special to me. You know, like me and Patrick, he was someone like you kind of have like as a father figure, you know, that you look at it a little differently. You know, and I definitely enjoyed my time with him. And most of the highlights of my career were definitely working with Patrick, you know, from, you know, winning some of my bigger shows, to my Arnold placings, to both my Olympia placings. And I'm not saying I couldn't have accomplished those with Matt, but I did accomplish them with Patrick. So I can't say it's like, well, it could have. It's like, well, it did happen with Patrick.
Right.
You know, and that build, you know, we had a lot of really special moments together. So to be honest, if I was going to do it the other way, And that's not because I was not happy about how I looked at the last show, or like, that's not what the conversation here is. Anything. If honestly, if I would have done it the other way, I would have just finished my career with Patrick. You know, I think I kind of owed him that. You know, I think we had been so good and so consistent, and really on an upward trajectory, that when we, you know, kind of missed the mark that last Olympia.
Yeah.
You know, I think I, you know, threw the baby out with the bathwater a little too hard on that one for sure. Which is definitely something I regret. Absolutely. You know, like I enjoyed doing that last prep with Matt, but I really would have liked to have done it with Patrick. So that's probably the only thing I would have changed. I think everything else is, you know, you kind of learn and grow and, you know, work with these different guys. I think you need to experience different coaches and things like that at certain times if it feels right to you. So I don't, you know, regret that initial change. But yeah, I would have liked to finish it out with Patrick for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you work with these different guys, do you feel that there's just, it's mostly about chemistry, or do you feel how do you feel when if you had to sit down and break down someone finding a coach, right? Because you have a really good ability to speak from this, because you work with Patrick, you work with Matt, you worked with, you know, even Dennis James. So if you had to give someone advice and say, what's the best thing to be able to really find that connectivity, what would you do? What would you say?
What I found for myself, the most important number one factor I found that led to my success with a coach was really less to do with the coach and more with my eagerness to please them. Like, and that sounds like, I don't mean that in some weird ass way. Like, I mean, in a way, like, you know, with someone that you look up to and that you really are striving to like make them proud, you know, and that you know, with Patrick, like I said, when I kind of saw him as a father figure and I saw him in a different light, I really just wanted to do good for him, you know, like obviously I want to do good for myself and for my career and stuff like that. But I also really I knew it meant a lot to Patrick and that he was very thankful for the opportunity he had to be working with me and to working with guys at that level. And, you know, he knew how much of a instrumental part of like my career this is, and that he was very thankful for the opportunity to be part of that. And it made me want to be good and be a good bodybuilder for him, you know, so it instilled a lot of trust in him for me. So I think, yeah, you know, just someone that you're, you know, always eager to please and that you're always like want to work your hardest for them. And that brings that out of you. And then, yeah, I think it's a relationship and a trust that you build. You know, I think once you start to lose faith in the system a little bit, or there's like, you know, these thoughts in the back of your head about not trusting the system 100%, I think that's when you get guys that start to wander in their programming and they're asking everybody on Instagram, like, hey, my coach is telling me to do this. What do you think? And then they get 75 guys telling them 75 different protocols. And then they're so damn confused. They have no idea what to do. You know, I think if there becomes a point where you're not trusting the system, then it's when it starts to become a problem. So, you know, find someone that you are like the work that they do, and someone that you think that you can trust, you know, see if you can build a relationship there. And then it's someone that you want to, you almost look up to and that you're eager to please in that regard, you know?
Yeah. I think the number one thing is connectivity, right? You have to be able to connect. And so that everyone says, well, for you to trust the process. Well, it goes beyond trusting the process. You have to have faith in the information you're getting to a degree where you're willing to do food training. I mean, if the guy turns you to, you know, eat shit, and you say how many ounces, right? And that's a very hard thing to do in an ego-ridden industry. I remember that was one of the hardest things I had to deal with as I was coming up as a coach, is I had to read just by conversations and in passing, I'll know whether or not I can work with somebody or not. Because I know I've worked with people where I just go, if you already kind of know the answer to the question, or you even pretended you knew, there's no way this is going to go well. You know, I can feel it from a million miles away. And with simple conversations, simple things, you know, I can just pick up on it. And that's what I've been able to be pretty good at, is being able to decipher who I feel like I can connect with and who I can't. because, and I think also I've had the luxury for the last several years to be able to pick and choose who I want to work with, because I allow them to come to me for it and not the other way around, because I don't try to convince anybody to come and work with me. But I feel that that puts me at a good advantage, because then you know that that's the first step, is that they're coming to you. I'm not trying to sell them on my services ever. And so I think that makes a huge difference, but that connectivity and that trust. But I guess, is there something that you remember from working with Patrick or any of the coaches that would be something that you like to share with the audience? Because I have a lot of people who are trainers who follow me, right, and listen to the podcast, and they like to take some of the information and be able to utilize it either for themselves or for their clients. But was there bits and pieces for each one of them that are strong points that you felt that you could share that was really good?
Man, that's something I'd have to think on more. I honestly have never even thought about that question. You know, I definitely learned different things from all these guys. I mean, you know, whether it was, you know, seeing how a guy does something different from a training perspective. I mean, initially, like the style of training that I followed for a lot of my career, you know, a little more high intensity training style like that is what I first got from Matt, you know, and I adopted that from Matt, and I trained like that for a long time and really enjoyed it. And I think it yielded a lot of progress, and I carried that on even when I was working with Patrick. You know, but yeah, I mean, I definitely picked up things from all these guys. I mean, even back to, you know, Greg and Dennis, or even guys before that. You know, Patrick, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, there's so many, we did a lot of shows together, you know. eh, I'd have to think about that more. It's tough to pinpoint like one specific thing that you know,
Sure.
picked up from a guy, you know. Um,
Yeah, like for example, was there things regarding the diet that you felt that Matt versus Patrick, right? Like, was there certain things?
Definitely different. I mean, Matt
Right.
is, you know, in terms of a nutrition standpoint, Matt is definitely a, you know, a higher protein guy, like more, definitely higher protein, where Patrick is more feed you more carbs, a little lower on the protein. You know, I was never going too crazy with the protein, more like 5, 6, 7 ounce portions at most. You know, so that was definitely a difference.
And that was with
That
Patrick.
was with Patrick. Yeah, he was definitely on
Okay.
the lower side compared to Matt. So, you know, I remember that initially when I started working with Patrick after working with Matt, you know, my protein decreased what felt like a significant amount. But then I was eating a lot more carbs and my training felt different. So, I mean, there was definitely differences there for sure.
So what was an average meal on Matt's program in terms of ounces? Was it more like on the 10 ounce, 12 ounce stage, you know, range?
Like 250 grams, whatever that is, you know, 10 ounces kind of thing. Where Patrick could more be like 200 grams raw, you know? So
Oh, wow.
like, yeah, well, yeah, like, so it would be like a 170 grams maybe cooked. So, you know, a good, you know, 25% less, 30% less than Matt for sure, what I was eating.
And the same number of meals?
Same number of meals. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much the same in terms of meal quantity. But then my carb intake and my fat intake was definitely higher. Yeah.
Okay. So the overall macros were kind of close, you think, or do you think it was?
Total calories was probably pretty close. But obviously this macro breakdown was definitely different.
Different.
Yeah, more protein with Matt, a little less carbs. And this is in a prep setting. But even in an off-season setting, I mean, Patrick, you know, was kept, if anything, when the food got higher, you know, that protein stayed low like that for sure. If the carbohydrates and the fats were higher, then that stayed down, so it wouldn't get too crazy. Which there was parts of it I liked. I mean, in terms of my digestion, and you know, my ability to get in bigger, to get in more calories when I had less protein that I was trying to digest, I actually found easier for myself. In it definitely an off-season setting. So that was definitely something I liked, and I made some really good progress in off seasons with Patrick. You know, where I definitely had some of my biggest leaps in terms of muscularity season to season. So yeah, definitely things that were different between the two of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel like that any of the super subs made any differences on that stuff? Because as coaches, people always have a stigma of low or high. They just do. And as they get through the thing, I guess, I know you're a guy that always had your health in mind, but was it something where did you feel a big difference, you know, when it came to protocols that were parts
The
of the
only
whole.
difference that Matt was Matt's definitely a guy that likes to use a little more AIs, especially like as you get close to a show, and really
Mhm.
likes to make sure that those levels are really shut down to get that level of dryness. Where Patrick was definitely on the other side of that, so that was actually a pretty big contrast. But in
Uh-huh.
terms of like the anabolic load or anything like that, I mean, there's no crazy differences between most of these guys. It
Mhm.
wasn't anything variances or any new crazy hidden European
Mhm.
drugs like I was looking for. But there was
Mhm.
the rest of it. Was very similar protocols. I mean, nothing like too crazy. But yeah, the AI dosing was definitely the biggest difference near the end. Which I found for me, some showings it definitely helped, and it helped me achieve a harder look. And sometimes I felt that my energy and my training just got down a little too crappy,
Mhm.
and that there was like a level of flatness that kind of incurred from it. So, I didn't love it every time. No.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of that has to do with trying to make up for those types of periods with extra sodium when you do that. Did you do any sodium manipulation during the 6 weeks, 8 weeks out, 4 weeks out, or was that something that you just kind of kept the same all the way through?
With Patrick, we would definitely do it, like not maybe from that far out,
Mhm.
Hmm.
but definitely. I remember the first show I did with him actually, right when I had switched over from Matt to him. There was actually like a very right from when I started working with him, he cranked my salt up like to like 10 grams a day,
Oh,
Oh
wow.
like
wow.
like crazy high, and then brought it down kind of into the show. And I actually looked really good for that first. That was the Tampa Pro I did that year where I placed third behind Luke Sando and Dexter, the 2019 Tampa Pro. And my conditioning was excellent for sure. So that was definitely like the first thing where I remember the biggest
Hmm.
change right off the hop, other than the protein intake, was that sodium manipulation and that protocol we did off the hop. But no, I didn't do too much crazy water stuff a lot of my career. Um, like I mean, I have, but not often with very high levels of success. you know, I found most times that I messed with anything like that too much in my career, no matter what coach it was. We definitely never got the desired result. I think.
Yeah, diminished returns. Right. The more you got to take water pills, the more you got to turn around and mess around with that the last couple of days.
Exactly. I mean, I
The
remember even the first show I did with Patrick. The very first one we did, we actually completely missed the mark. I did that Tampa Pro in 2020. Sorry, after that first one I did with him, like a couple weeks after I started, the next season, 2020, I did the Tampa Pro where I lost to Hunter. I was second place to Hunter, but like I was second place, but I looked like real bad. Like I looked like I hadn't eaten in a week. Because we tried to do some, things with water manipulation and diuretics. That was just too like flattened me out way too much, and rendered a look that was just like really not great. So after that, we tried actually going the complete opposite. I did New York Pro 4 weeks, 3, 4 weeks later,
Mhm.
and we did no water sodium manipulation or diuretics. I did zero. So I just like, however I looked the week of, we just like fed me up and marched me on stage, and I won the New York Pro that year.
There
So,
There
you
you
go.
go.
so it was just like it, not saying that guys can't do different things like that and that you shouldn't use diuretics or water manipulation or sodium. It's just more variables and more things that you got to control, and I think there's guys that can definitely control these things and good, but definitely didn't get it nailed down that first show, and found that, less was more when it came to my physique, especially with water, things like that. And yeah, that was kind of something that Patrick and I really kept as a staple throughout pretty much the entire time I worked with him. Going forward is in terms of things from a like peaking and water, sodium, diuretic, manipulation standpoint, we really kept as basic and minimal as possible. Like we really, if we could do zero, we would try to, and if we were doing as minimal manipulation as possible, to really just try and minimize the amount of variables that we had at play there. With me and diuretics, sometimes like my physique, especially, like I found a flat Iain versus a full Iain. Like some guys can get away being a little on the flat side and still look pretty good. There's some guys like me that like I get a little flat and I look like I'm like I shouldn't win like a regional NPC show. So it definitely changes my physique dramatically. I'm not like a crazy round bubbly guy. So I need to be really full to kind of show off the muscularity that I actually have, or I lose what little bit of fullness and pop that there is to my muscle if I'm not, really, really full like that. So that was definitely something that we kind of carried on for basically all the shows that we did after that. Was very, very minimal from a water and diuretic standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that. I think that, I would always call it the fuck up fairy, right? The fuck up fairy shows up. I think when you start to mess around with diuretics, you really want to try to look your best coming into that week and not try to rely on diuretics for that last push, and say, I'm going to look right after I take a water pill. You want to look right going into the show. And then that way your body is just easily just maintaining at that point. I know when I, try to dial people in, it's always trying to be as close as you can as early as possible. So that way you're just minimally making adjustments. But I think that, who are you working with when I saw you in Vancouver when Hady was doing it? And I think that was 19, right? 2019 when we were out there?
Matt, yeah.
Oh, that was with Matt.
Okay. Yeah, that was the last season.
That was great lighting, man. That show had amazing lighting. We still talk about that show.
And that show was actually a good showing for me. Like, I mean, I had a really good level of fullness and I looked really good there. And this was kind of what I was talking about in terms of where we would, that year where I started to get a little, wanting to try something different. We did that at Vancouver Pro, and we did very minimal from a water manipulation standpoint, and really pushed the fullness, and it rendered a really good look. And then I did, another show a couple of weeks later, and we tried something kind of very different, and it rendered a bad look. It's like, man, we kind of got it right the show before. Like, I just want to keep doing the good thing, like we don't need to mess with the good thing too much here, Right. So that was really where, like, and that's exactly when it kind of started. There was the Vancouver in 2019 there. Yeah.
Yeah. So when that started happening, and I guess when you started coming up, and I guess, what was the first year you placed 7th at the Olympia?
2020.
2020. At the time, you're coaching your brother-in-law, and I guess with that situation, I feel that there were some comments made at some point. I think it was by Chris Aceto, and he said something about like, oh, it's not hard just being able to coach somebody while you're doing a show, right? And I guess I want to hear your take on that, because I have my personal take on it, but I want to hear what your take was, because I think it's extremely difficult by doing a show, let alone the Olympia. You're doing the Olympia and trying to help your brother-in-law be the best in the world in a different division while you're trying to be the best in the world in your own division. So, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit.
It was very easy until it was very hard is really how it felt. It felt like it wasn't that much of a task, and that it, didn't feel like it was adding a lot to my plate for the longest time. And I was excited, and really seeing his rise and his potential was very exciting. And until I got to that level, until I got to the Olympias, and then there was that pressure on me, as well as now he had placed 7th in, one of the Olympias, or second, sorry, he had placed 2nd in one of the Olympias. I placed 7th. And now there's like these pressures of both of us trying to, really get that, him to win, me to get into the top 5. Like, there's some new added pressures, especially when you talk to the Olympia level. And it became a point where I was only coaching Chris for Olympias because he was just competing one time a year.
Right.
So it's not like, I'm prepping him for Toronto Pro where it's a little easier, and then the Olympia, it's a little harder. It was like, it was only one show a year, and it was the biggest one, which I was also competing in and really getting into, the peak of my career there. So yeah, it was definitely, it wasn't bad until then, that first Olympia where I came 7th. I definitely started to feel that the time management and the energy management from a mental, like, energy standpoint, started to get very difficult, and the men's open, like, I mean, you're coaching guys in the open and in classic, and I've seen you're like, I haven't slept yet today. Because, like, the men's open guys are going on Friday night, and they're getting off late. And then the classic guys are going on Saturday morning. They're getting up early, like, you're just fucking staying up all night,
The whole night.
It's like, I'm seeing guys when they get off stage on Friday night, they're getting a couple meals in them, seeing what they look like before they go to bed. And then, I'm at 5 a.m. Chris is getting up to do his tan and taking a look at him, and you're like, man, I was just looking at Derek like 45 minutes ago, so that's kind of how it was. But it was like me and and then him, so, I'm trying to send pictures to Patrick and kind of take care of myself and make sure that, when I need to be sleeping, I'm sleeping, when I need to be eating, I'm eating. And then the time management, the energy management between that and then Chris trying to compete at that level got very difficult and very stressful for sure. And, and when you have to be honest with yourself at some point too, and know when, I knew that I could be, that there was more that could be done for Chris in terms of a, keeping an eye on him at that level,
Mhm.
like even the last show we did, like the last Olympia, like we stayed in different Airbnbs because it was, multiple people and stuff. So it was, we were there for the Olympia, but we were sending pictures, and then it's tough. Like he's sending pictures during the middle of the day when I'd be taking a nap between meals. And then, it got very, very difficult to do both. So, like I said, it got to a point where I'm like, okay, and we had the conversation of, you know, maybe exploring other options in terms of the relationship for coaching, to get the most out of both of us, and it wasn't just like, it's taking that stress off me and then giving him something more to get him to that next level. We had won Olympias at that point already, but I knew Chris could be better than he was. And I knew that there was definitely, with a more watchful eye, especially like not even just in a prep setting for like the full year, like Chris, it was like, I would take over and help Chris when it would come into a prep. And, it's different dynamic when you're a brother. It's not so detail oriented and so harsh and watchful, like, someone that's like a really coaching figure and has that different relationship like that. So, so I to bring in someone that could kind of be there full year for him, and keep an eye on him, and then into the shows, and be there for him when he really needs it at the shows. What I didn't feel I was able to at that point. I think it kind of got to the point where we're like, okay, this is the best option for both of us, to try and reach, the next level for both of our careers. Right.
Yeah, and I think honestly, your job was way harder than mine. I mean, doing one task where I'm just trying to help one, each individual athlete is very difficult. But I never had to do that while I'm competing at a show. Let alone when I competed, I did NPC natural shows, not the Olympia, not the level anywhere close to what you were doing in terms of the exhaustion, in terms of, I've only seen that secondhand from my athletes, right? But for you and the mental exhaustion of you being, dehydrated, cutting your water back, trying to deal with stress, all of this stuff while trying to have a clear head. I'm like, I get my hats off to you. I can't walk into a room with a TV in the background when I go look at Chris or Derek or Hany, right? Like I have to have the TVs off. I have to have the radio off. I have to, like, you can ask my wife, like she'll tell you, she's like, all these people out of the room. Hany's going to take a look. He needs to focus. And this is how I am. And for you to be able to do what you guys did, again, man, that's an amazing task.
Yeah. And honestly, for a while, it was a very welcome distraction from my own mind, to be honest. When I was prepping for shows at the same time, and it would be time when I would almost have like too much time to get in my own head, having Chris to like help, or even Melissa, when they were like, I had one Olympia where I competed and both of them competed, so
Oh, wow.
2018 Olympia was my first Olympia. I competed, did my first one there, and both Chris and Melissa competed in the Olympia as well. So there was 3 of us in that Olympia. But I came 14th my first Olympia. Like I wasn't, it was a very different dynamic than when I started to win every show that I was doing during the season and started to place 7th at the Olympia. And, now you're fighting to like, hey, I want to get in the first call out, versus when you're 14th the first year, it's like, I'm just fucking happy to be here, bro. Like it was a very different dynamic, so, yeah, at first it was a welcome distraction. I mean, it was nice. It kept my head off of, I would just, what my coach would tell me, I would just do. And then my, brain power was kind of working on them. And I didn't like overthink, my stuff too much. Just followed the plan and didn't really overthink it. So it was a welcome distraction for a very long time. Like, and that's what I was saying from the beginning. Like it was really easy until it wasn't. It was like nothing. It felt like no extra work. And then it was like, man, this is really hard. And I know that there's, more that can be being done for both of us on, on both ends here. So, like, I didn't want to ever know that I was not giving him 100%. But then I also got to a point in my own career where I wasn't willing to not give myself 100% to give it to him. I'm not,
Mhm.
if I need to get up at 5 a.m. to take on Chris, but I also had to, get sleep because I was competing later that day. Like there had to be some point where I'm like, okay, well, I can't, I'm not going to get up at 5 a.m. and I need to, there needs to be some change here. So when it came to that point, then that was definitely like, okay, we gotta change things up here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people don't understand the timing of everything. Also, with Chris having the next day at 5 a.m. to get up, have a couple of meals, it just throws everything in.
No, it's tough. Like, with the schedules being so different, you need to be really keeping a close eye on that guy on the Friday. And then I'm trying to, get ready to compete that day. So there's a whole chunk of the day where you really can't have a good eye on them and things can change so fast. And then you get off stage and, get a meal and you want to go to bed. And then, you're trying to get as much sleep and, get a good sleep that night and sleep in as long as you possibly can, probably onto Saturday, and we're really rest up for the Saturday.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, these guys are getting up early to get tan and get on, for the morning prejudge on Saturday. So, someone had to give and someone had to take, like it was either I'm getting up early and taking away from potentially my look, or I'm getting, or I'm not getting up early and I potentially am not seeing him. So it came to a point where I was okay doing that for a long time. And like, okay, I think I can do both. And, I can give a little bit and, we can make this work, until it got to a point where I'm, like I said, when I'm trying to fight for these top spots, I really didn't have room to be flexible on that at the same degree, So then that's when we decide to change. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when it came down to everything that you made decisions on for this, this next year, how do you see current bodybuilding right now? Like as now it's it's not so myopic, and you're actually get to see a wider range of like physiques, and you're looking at it in a different point of view now that you're not competing. Especially in the open class right now, what do you see when you look at the current stable of athletes? Because I know Lee Haney had some things to say. I heard that he was being a bit negative. Again, it's hard for me to kind of digest that because I have my opinions about it. I'd like to get Lee Haney on here. It's actually at some point. Yeah.
I'm going to completely disagree with everything Lee Haney said. I think bodybuilding is in a great space right now. I think there's a lot of really great guys coming into the sport and giving it a lot of good light and good attention, that are really helping build up the sport. And I think there's a lot of really great physiques on the rise, that are making bodybuilding very exciting. I mean, even just from guys like this year, like guys like Martin, coming up and really making improvements, to Derek coming in out of the 212, and these battles of Hany and SAMSON kind of on the rise, and Andrew. There's a lot of very exciting storylines, I think, in bodybuilding right now, and a lot of very, very, very good bodybuilders. So, for Lee to say that there's, that's kind of shit compared to what it used to be, I think is a crazy statement to be making. I think we're in a very good place with bodybuilding right now. And I'm, as a fan of the sport, I'm very excited just to, like that first Olympia when last year's Olympia, when I could just be there as a fan and watch the sport and spectate. That was my first time watching an Olympia since sitting in the stands and actually watching it since, 7, 8, 9 years. I hadn't watched any of that kind of stuff. Even when Chris would compete most of the years, I never saw him on stage. So for me to see Chris on stage last year, like I hadn't seen him on stage in a few years, because it's always like I said, Saturday prejudging, I'm sleeping still, I'm getting up, I'm seeing his pictures or taking a quick look at him. I'm going back to bed. He's going on stage. He gets off, So I didn't even watch the show, like even for Chris or Melissa or a lot of these people, that I was working with, because I was, trying to balance both things here. So using my time as effectively as I could, felt I could at the time, So to just be there as a fan and watch the show this year, it was definitely very exciting for me. And I really realized, how great of a crop of bodybuilders there is right now. Definitely. Yeah.
So did you send Melissa? Was that what was going on? Would Melissa go with them and then be a second set of eyes for you possibly?
Be there, or he would be with, Courtney some of the years or whatever, and they would send me pictures, and kind of just keep an eye on it. And I would relay back and forth as I could. There was definitely a couple of years where I would be there. Sometimes I definitely have been there and been backstage for a couple of them at certain points. but actually like sat and spectated in the audience and watched him actually compete. It had been a while for sure. You know, I a while that I couldn't even remember that the last time, to be honest, you know, to actually sit there and like watch as a fan. You know, it was definitely a different dynamic for me.
Yeah, that's cool perspective, because when you were there this last year, right? So we were backstage together, and you know, Chris came out and was, you know, taking off his clothes and warming up and everything else, and you're kind of like hovering around him. Yeah, I can say you had a big old smile on your face.
I just felt like a fly on the wall there, kind of like watching
Yeah.
this all happen, you know. And watching you and him kind of do your process and seeing it all, you know, was fun for me. It was like, you know, getting kind of that, you know, backstage look, but like the backstage look when you're a little removed and more of like a fan. You know, it's like being a fan of bodybuilding, getting to go watch backstage, you know, Jay Cutler backstage at the Olympia when you're like a big bodybuilding fan, like 2009, you know, you're like, this is the craziest thing ever, you know?
Right.
So for me, it was fun. It's, you know, I'm a fan of bodybuilding. I'm, you know, I love bodybuilding very much. And obviously, you know, I have a relationship with Chris. So, you know, to be there and kind of see it all happening and seeing how good he looked and stuff, it was obviously a lot of fun for me, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it was good. I'm actually so thankful that you were able to make it, because we got Calvin was able to get some really good images of the three of us, and being able to do that, because again, I was able to work with Jay after he'd lost, but for me to be able to work with somebody who's already been winning was kind of crazy, right? So, you know, I've mentioned it in several podcasts, and it was kind of like, okay, well, this is so much pressure, you know, but at the end, you know, it's just that just makes you step up.
Actually,
you know?
I'm curious to talk about that actually, you know, from your perspective, you know, when you came and Chris was winning, was there ever a point in your mind where you're like, I don't want to do this kind of thing? Like, he's already winning. I don't really care, you know? Like, what was that thought process there? You know, like at first, if he came to you, you were like, nah, I'm good, bro. You know, like how did that thought process work for you?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard the story in its entirety or not, but I had a podcast with Fuad, and it was one of those things where he asked me, like, hey, this rumor was going around, because, you know, you guys did a podcast. You know, you guys did a podcast.
This is I fucked this up, and the funny thing is like I let that out as a thing when it actually wasn't even a thing yet, and you can speak to that. You know, like I said, because me and Chris and we did a live podcast, and I was saying, and I was like, you know, I know that. It was public at this point. I kind of said that, you know, we have decided that, you know, Chris is going to have someone else help him for this year. And someone asked, you know, if I knew who it was going to be. And I said, I don't think there's any decisions been made. Like, I think he has some people that interest him. And I said a few names, one of which was yours.
Right.
But I know you and him hadn't even spoken about that yet, because I remember you heard, like, you were messaging Chris after, like, so apparently we're working, you know, like you guys didn't even know, you know, so it was this whole big conspiracy theory then that came after the fact that there was like, Chris and Hany had been working together for 6 months and they're keeping it secret and everyone's this, and Iain let it slip by accident. I'm like, no, I just said that he was one of the people that was, but they're not working together yet. And then obviously you guys ended up after that. So that almost reaffirmed that I was like hiding it, you know? But I was like, they're actually not. I swear they haven't been working together yet. And they haven't even confirmed this relationship in any regard. So when it ended up that you guys did decide to work together, I was like, oh my God, this is hilarious, you know? So yeah, that's how it all started from my end. Yeah.
So when the rumor got out because of what you said, I was in the middle of doing a podcast with Fuad, like right when we were talking, or it was either right after the podcast or before the podcast. I think the podcast was over, and then he's like, dude, this whole rumor thing, because obviously Fuad knew that I hadn't spoken to Chris at all. We hadn't even spoken.
Well, because he was doing the event with me, so I had told him, like, when this all started to happen, I was with him there, and I was like, bro, Chris is going to be so pissed, like, that this is getting out now, because now it's like, you know, because I knew, like, I felt bad. I texted Chris. I'm like, man, like, sorry, I didn't. This was taken so out of context with how I said it. Like, I didn't say that you and anyone specifically were working and they latched onto this one. So then, you know, obviously I felt bad that if he did end up working with you, it looked like we've been lying previously, you know?
Right.
Because like, say I had said that, and then the rumor becomes, you know, that he was going to work with Hany, and then a month later it comes out that he's working with, you know,
Patrick.
yeah, working with Patrick or Neil Hill or someone, you know,
Right.
then it's like, okay, he wasn't lying, but like, you know, then it came out that it was working with you. So that it just like affirmed this thing that wasn't even a truth to begin with. So yeah, Fuad was there like live when this was all kind of unfolding. So he was kind of like, what the fuck's going on here with all this, you know?
Yeah, but he asked me after the podcast was over, and he's like, well, would you do it? And I go, no. Like you can ask Fuad. I mean, if we had Fuad on the podcast, I mean, he even knows. I go, no. I go, I have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Because if he wins, they're going to say he was going to win anyway when he was already winning. And if he loses, it's my fault. So now all of a sudden, it just kind of like, that's like the black eye, right? And so I go, you know, he has his own brand. He's not one of my athletes for Evogen. So again, every box was not checked. It's like, what are the benefits here, right? And so when we, so I'm like, no, you know. And then next thing you know, Chris ends up calling me to talk about it. And he says, well, I did talk to Iain that I would, you know, want to coach. And then, you know, would you be interested? And I'm like, yeah, like if you want to get some workouts in, but that's it, you know, and that was it. Like if you want to get some workout, yeah, we'll get some workouts in. It would be cool. Like if you need some, you know, things, some pointers, how to sharpen your mind to not get distracted on certain things, you know, just bounce things on the phone and all that. And he's like, no, like I'm talking about like the whole prep and A, B, and C. And I was like, dude, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't ready for this. Let me think about it. And let me just kind of get back to you, because I was pretty overwhelmed with it, because I don't look at someone's popularity or something like that. I just look at like the fact that, okay, he's got an issue with his autoimmune disease. I don't know anything about that. I don't pretend to know anything about it. I got limitations. I have a time limitation, because at that point it was like 15 or something weeks out, give or take a couple weeks. And so I didn't get the February, March, you know, where I would normally want to start with somebody. I have to understand, like, are they going to be able to take open criticism? Are they going to be able to, you know, communicate back and forth when we jump on the phone? Can we, you know, how is that all going to work?
You really didn't have any time for like kind of a feeling out process before jumping into an Olympia prep. It's not like you can start February, March and kind of build a relationship and kind of see, you know, how this person ticks and, you know, and see kind of how they operate and all these things. And, you know, it's really just like, all right, it's time to go, you know, 16 weeks out, let's go, you know?
Yeah.
So
because
it was definitely a different, you know.
When I was on my run of winning all the USAs, like starting in 2001, we had Quincy Taylor, then I had Dries Wardell, 2002 overall winner. I mean, all these guys were all super heavies. Bill Wilmore when he won nationals. All these guys, the one thing I had in common was I make all my clients start 1 year out. They'd have to start 1 year out. I don't just do a prep. I need to start prep. For me means a year out. I do 6 to 9 months. I build the program, see how they can figure out whether or not that we're compatible and if they're going to be able to utilize and execute the plan. And then I will commit or not commit to doing a prep. And that's how my system worked. And so, and then what I did was I was like, okay, now none of these things are, you know, even with Jay Cutler in 09, we started in January 4th on my birthday. We started in 09 after he lost to Dexter, right? That's when we started. Yes, and he came off of a loss, but he was super motivated because he's like, look, dude, I know I can look a lot better than that, right? We got to, you know, do this. And then we decided in July whether or not we're going to prep together for the show in 09, because we hadn't decided yet if I was going to do the full prep. It was just the off season at that point. And so I didn't have any of those things. So again, going back to my wife, she was the one that talked me into it. She's like, well, you should do it because of the challenge. And I'm like, no, dude, this is kind of crazy. This is like, you know, this is the risk, you know, the risk is this, and then the reward is this at the end. And she was the one that says, but this is why you push yourself. This is what I know you, I've been with you for 16, 17 years. And this is what will definitely, I think it'll, you know, the challenge. So she's the one that, you know, after a week talked me into it because I didn't call Chris back. I just said, you know what, if he's that interested, maybe he'll call me back, and then hopefully he won't. Yeah, and that's what he did. He called me a week later, and then he's like, so, you know, and then by then I said, okay, let's kind of try this out, and I'm going to give you some suggestions on some training. And then he started doing some of the FSC7 training stuff that he put on his video. There's like some blood starving sets and stuff, just to see like, hey, look, let me just give you some suggestions on this stuff, and then let's just ease into it. And then the first couple of weeks, and then I flew out there, and then we trained at that undercover gym that we were able to do, so nobody would see us. Yeah, and then we went from there. But it was hard. So to answer your question, it was very, very difficult. Like like I said, the initial response was no. Like, this is not. It's just could be really, it could be a dumpster fire. And I was like, yeah, but yeah, but then it worked out. I think we were able, we worked out. I mean, all the guys had a good year that year, and it's been good. I mean, it's a cool dynamic, and being able to, and then obviously I was able to call you too and say, hey, look, what are some of the things that you guys had to do or how to stay away from? I got to figure out, like, what is he sensitive to, all the things. And, obviously you gave great feedback on that, so that I can get, for the time that I didn't have with them in the off season, get up to speed and be able to do that. And, so that was the whole thing. So it wasn't, everybody wants to say, well, it's you versus Iain. I go, no, it's not. It's me trying to carry on what Iain was doing and trying to do that.
Yeah. And I never looked at it like that. And I'm not someone that's, has so much pride, especially when it comes to someone that I have a personal relationship like Chris, where obviously with his career, if there's someone that can be doing better and giving him more, I want it. Like, it's not like I'm like, well, I don't want him to be with a better guy because he might like make him look better. I'm like, I fucking hope he makes him look better. Like, I hope I know Hany is a better coach than me, and I'm very confident that he can bring him to that next level and can give him the attention that I didn't feel that I could. So when you guys decided to pair up, I was very thankful, because it felt like it was a sigh of relief. It was like he picked someone that I'm like, okay, I feel confident that he's going into hands that he's going to be well handled, and I think honestly what probably made me feel the most safe, with him choosing to work with you was just your experience with guys at that level, like with Olympia champions, and I think you can speak to it, and I've just, from me being around Chris, I've seen it, like that pressure and that it changes things so different when you're the guy on top and having to retain it every year. When you're fighting for it, like Jay coming back in 09, or, guys like, starting to win their, like Phil winning his first one with you kind of thing, versus like now trying to win it and continue to stay on top. It's very tough mentally, and it takes a very mentally tough and very strong person to continue to motivate themselves. So for me to see him with someone like you that was very familiar with that scenery in terms of, working with champions, and the mental space that works in, to get guys to thrive there, definitely put like a semblance of peace in me. I'm like, all right, I'm good with this. Like, Chris will definitely be in good hands here. And then that especially from that mental standpoint of like, really helping him in a regard that I definitely felt I didn't have a handle on, like I barely had to control my own damn mind when I'm going on stage at the Olympia, let alone, a guy that's trying to defend Olympia titles. So someone that had a lot of experience like that with that, like you, definitely made me feel good. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the vote of confidence. I think that also, I mean, you and I've talked about this too. I mean, how much do you think that amount of that anxiety that you had kind of held you back?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I can definitely see a very direct correlation, in the amount of anxiety I was feeling and self-doubt that I was having, and the physiques that I started to have and that it rendered in terms of my looks and my progression. When I was enjoying training the most and putting the least pressure on myself, or even when I had pressure but I controlled it well and used it and fueled it into the right direction well. It was definitely the years where I was doing the best and seeing the most upward trajectory, and then there became a point where it started to take control of me in a negative way. And then I started to, not enjoy a lot of things, and really, really could see a decline in, not even just like my physique, but in like my whole process, that the difficulty of things in the process, it felt very different, so, I think when you definitely let that overtake you and you don't handle it well, it can definitely be a huge detriment to you as a bodybuilder, from a mental and a physical standpoint, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's different reasons why people succumb to the anxiety and pressure. And I feel like certain ones which can be in, let's say, a top three at the Olympia, and they don't, some of them really don't want it enough. And not say that they don't want it enough, like, hey, I don't want to be champion, but they don't want to have to deal with the pressure of continuously just, because what do you do after you win? That's so they self-sabotage, right? And whether it's the Olympia or I've even seen some people do it at the national level, USA shows that I worked with in the past. And I have another, yeah, yeah. And I feel like it's a thing. And especially with social media now and everything else, it's a big thing. But do you see yourself ever possibly coming back?
No, I don't know. I mean, I can never say never, but I also, I would have to have a very honest discussion with myself about what I was looking to get out of it, you know? And if I think I could go back at it and be realistic with my abilities, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and not go back thinking that if I don't place seventh at the Olympia, that I'll be disappointed, and that it wouldn't have been worth it, and do it because I love bodybuilding and I love the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and because I want to see what I can still do and push myself if my mind's a little clearer. The thought of it definitely is enticing to me at times. You know, I miss that challenge and I miss having something that I feel very driven towards in that regard. Um, but yeah, no, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite there yet from a mental standpoint that I would be able to do it and not, and be happy with the whole situation, you know?
Mm. I see what you're saying. I mean, obviously, I saw you last week, and you're still in really good shape. So that's why I was just like, wow, you're still in good shape. You know, you
Look,
haven't lost a
I
lot.
definitely have some time away from competing has definitely, and some time even just away from training. I mean, when I first stopped competing, I didn't lift like a bodybuilder for like 10 months, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I said, I was just, I put so much pressure. And when I'm saying pressure, I'm not even just talking about pressure of like my competitive prowess, like of doing better in placings, like pressure in terms of like every workout being so important and overthinking, you know, the meticulousness of every workout to think that am I getting the most? Is everything as effective as possible? You know, I started hyper analyzing things to like the umpteenth degree, you know. So I think some time away from removing that pressure from training really reignited my love and really reminded me of why I got into bodybuilding in the first place, which is just because I fucking love to train. Like I just love to
Mm-hmm.
train hard. You know, I love to the challenge of like pushing myself in the gym. You know, like when we were training in Florida, like, you know, I'm not like, you know, sauce the gills and doing like I used to, kind of, you know, like in terms of the weights or in terms of, you know, the physical capabilities that I have. But like I still want to push myself as hard as I possibly can, you know, and I still love to train. Like that's what drove me in bodybuilding for so long, is that love and, you know, desire to really push myself from a physical standpoint. That pursuit is what really excited me. And I think some time away from the gym and the pressures of training and pressures of competing definitely have reignited and reinvigorated my love for that, for sure. Yeah.
Did you when you were competing? Were you someone that always had somebody in mind, whether it was a show that you wanted to beat or somebody that what was like? Did you have any kind of rivalry out there that you were like, dude, this guy, I can't have this guy beat me?
I had measuring sticks for sure. I mean, my first one, the first big one for me, there was other smaller ones along the way, but the first big one, and that I went, you know, out of my way to like really put myself there, was Steve Kuklo
Oh,
in the Texas Pro there, you know, because I had won come seventh at the Olympia the year before, and Steve I think had placed sixth like 1 or 2 years prior to that. And I won Tampa, and then there was Texas the next week, and I was already qualified, but I was like, you know, Steve's doing Texas. This is his home show. You know, I'm coming off a win, so like, you know, if I don't win, it's not like, you know, I didn't really have anything to lose from that standpoint, and I really wanted to see where I stood next to a guy that was just like one spot, you know, one place higher, one little bit more successful than me in terms of his, you know, his competitive placing. So that was like the first, you know, measuring stick for that. But definitely the person that I was chasing the most was in my career probably was Hunter. I think Hunter was that guy for me. He beat me in that 2020 Tampa, then I beat him at that 2020 Olympia. And then I never beat him again after that. And that was like one thing that really drove me to like, I just want to beat this guy one more fucking time, like
Right.
I got him that first Olympia, the 2020 Olympia, I got him there. I was 7th, he was 8th. And I looked really good that show. And then, I just wanted, I lost to him then the next Olympia, because I don't think we competed during the year. So then it would have been the 21 Olympia. He was 4th that year, right? And I was 7th again. So then, then it was now him 2 to my 1. And that was one that really drove me. Like I really wanted to get one more win over him for sure. So if I come back, it's just to try and get a win on Hunter.
That's it. Yeah.
Well,
he's growing.
I'll wait till Hunter starts to decline a little bit and I'll be nice and fresh. I'll hop back at it,
What about, have you ever thought about Classic? Would you ever think about Classic?
No, I'm too naturally heavy to ever make a Classic cutoff. I mean, I think for my height, because I'm only 5'10", I think my cutoff is like less than 220, like,
what are you weighing right now?
Yeah. I mean, I took 0 anabolics and lifted no weights for a year and I was still like 245, So I think to peel another 25, 30 pounds off that I'd be looking pretty weird. I think, like it would look I'd look a little like emaciated, I think if it was like 235 for my weight or 230, I could look okay.
What was your weight on stage? What was your stage weight?
My last few years, so the heaviest I competed at was Vancouver in 2022, and I was like 263. And then every show between kind of 2020 and the time I retired, 2020 and 2023, I was kind of in the 254 to 260 range. Yeah, with the lowest being 254, the highest being 263 in Vancouver.
Yeah. Jay was 252, I think, in 2009, but I think he's a little bit shorter than you. I think Jay's he's 5.
Yeah. So my best looks were probably like in the mid 250s as a whole, like Texas Pro, Tampa, the Arnold, all those ones I was kind of like 255, 257. That's kind of seemed to be where I looked the best. I think Vancouver, I was still a little on the heavy side. I could have been a little sharper. And then if I started to get a little lighter, down to 254, 53, I started to look like I didn't quite have the pop and the muscularity that I had in some of the other shows. So yeah, that seemed to be the sweet spot for me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had some questions because we had some people in the office that wanted to ask a couple questions. And so we're going to get over into, okay, this is going to be a really good, juicy one. What were your thoughts regarding the SAMSON Douda MILOS situation with?
Oh boy, man, I don't really know. Like, I think that there's definitely more to be desired from SAMSON. I think completely honestly, I think we all want to see and we all want more from SAMSON. We know that there's another level that this guy can bring it. And I think neither of the guys kind of handled the situation well. I think there was emotions and I think people take things personally. And I don't think either of them kind of, probably handled it the way that they would have liked to, looking back in retrospect in terms of, the social media kind of whirlwind that kind of ensued with it. But I don't fault SAMSON in any way. People are kind of like, she owed it to MILOS or this or that to stay with him. It's like, look, I think he stuck with MILOS and gave him a lot of chances there. And I think they did accomplish a lot of great things together. But I think that there's, if SAMSON's being honest with himself and if he's seeing the outside critiques or talking to the judges, that there's more that is desired. There's a different level of conditioning and things like that he needs to get to reach the pinnacle of the sport. And it seemed that they were kind of, being pretty consistent with the level that they were achieving, which wasn't the level that was high enough. So I don't fault him at all for looking for, a different take on things. But I think, when you have fans of the sport that are passionate in both camps, it just ends up creating this fucking shitstorm on the back end of people saying that this guy should have done this and this. And, I think that was all kind of messy, but I think that SAMSON should do what he thinks is best for his career, and it's his career and his career alone to kind of make those decisions.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of people don't realize that Milos likes to, he goes on a lot of podcasts, he does a lot of things, and Samson doesn't, right? He's the kind of guy who
Milos gets to lead the charge in terms of the story.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I think that's a little unfair for the athlete. You know what I mean? I think that, I think Samson's just trying to be professional, and he's trying to be kind of there. And obviously, I know that just even recently with a post that Derek put up yesterday, Milos had comments on there, and I know he said something about, I don't know, that he doesn't like the way that Derek does his vacuum pose. You know what I mean?
He likes to give his 2 cents there for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think it's it's tough, and I feel for Samson that when you just are trying to make the moves that are best for your career, and it gets kind of all sucked into this crap of drama that is really just not productive or not relevant in any regard. So I'm excited to see what he does this year. I just saw him guest pose actually at Fuad's show last weekend. And he looks a whole lot different than Pittsburgh. I can tell you that. The amount of more size and volume that he's got back to his physique just in the last couple of weeks of getting back to training, getting back on stuff, and a whole protocol kind of getting for the Olympia prep getting started. His body's definitely responding and changing very quickly, and he looked very, very impressive in Fuad show.
Yeah, I saw some of the pictures and videos. They look great. Who's he working with now?
I have no idea. I think it's just him and his wife are doing doing his prep. I think they're doing from a nutrition standpoint. And then I think he's living in the Middle East, and just having guys train him there, or working with, whatever the training crew is there to kind of help push him in training. Whatever those guys do over there. I don't really know, but he's living over there, training over there. And then I think him and his wife are kind of leading the charge in terms of the actual prep itself. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So, again, it was really good to be in Pittsburgh and seeing everybody out there. We did a video, obviously, Chris was out there, Derek was out there. You got to see so many of the top guys. And speaking of top guys, Nick Walker, tell me what your thoughts are on Nick.
Yeah. I think there was definitely more to be desired from what I saw from him in New York. I think he looked great. I think he's still one of the top bodybuilders in the world. And there was improvements in certain aspects, but still some that I'd like to see, if we were just being from a critique of the physique standpoint, that you'd still like to see in other spots. I think his waistline, I don't think it's a big issue at the moment, but it's something that I think he definitely needs to be mindful. And I know Tyler, gave a critique of that when he did the recap of New York. That for someone like Nick, where he is a little shorter, and a little more compact like that, you need to be very mindful of that and how much it can throw off kind of your, the balance of your physique and the shape of your physique. And, when you're even the parts that you have that are so impressive can kind of be lost when the illusions aren't there throughout the entire physique, So, I think it's something that he can control. And I saw he just, was guest posing the other day, this past weekend, and it looked like he is starting to get it a little, figure things out, get it a little better under control. But I mean, the guy is still obviously friggin' big as a damn house. But yeah, I mean, New York, I would have liked to see him a little bit on the crisper side, a little tighter, and just have that waist in a little more controlled. But I also think that him and Matt are very mindful of the critiques that they get from the judges, and they'll take these things and work very hard at improving them as much as humanly possible by the Olympia, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I think Tyler said it was a 1 point, right? It was like a 1 point difference.
Yeah. Between him and Martin, it was 1 point. 1 point at prejudging and finals each. So 2 point total, but yes, it's still a 1 point show. So, and I completely see where that comes from. Like, look, obviously Nick is bigger and more muscular, but Martin's very balanced and has very little like visible weak points. You don't look at Martin's physique and you're like, okay, this needs to improve. This, it's like, it all kind of fits well. It all flows well. There's little things like, you could, get a little more arms, especially in the front double, a little more detail there, more size overall. But, he is very balanced. His conditioning was exceptional. His overall polish was very, very good. So it makes for a very dangerous bodybuilder. So even though he was getting out muscled in a lot of ways with Nick, he still was, able to go very close toe to toe for him by having a lot of other really great attributes.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's going to be a really good Olympia. I think the next set of shows. What are your thoughts? Who do you think? Who you most likely to
Pro
see?
this coming weekend.
Yeah, who do you think is going to be? The kind of like a breakout person over at that show.
I don't know if there'll be any breakouts. I think we have, Hassan Mustafa, Akeem, Andre Presti, Quinton. I don't know who else. John Jewett, who looked really good. So I think there is some good guys, and I think it's there's a lot of guys that could win the show. My head, because he looked good earlier in the year, my head wants to go to Akeem on that one. I think if Akeem is anywhere close to how he looked at the finals for the Arnold or in the Arnold UK, the night shows there, I think he'll be very, very tough to beat. But I mean, someone like Hassan Mustafa is like ridiculously muscular, and if he keeps his waist in control, he's tough for anybody to handle in terms of just like a pure muscularity standpoint. I mean, he's one of the biggest guys I've ever seen in person, just from an actual muscle on his frame standpoint. I think Quinton, I know he had a little bit of a disappointing showing in New York. A lot of hype was built for him.
Yeah.
He had some very impressive offseason pictures and leading into the show. And, I think they missed the mark a little bit there in terms of the fullness and the peak, into the show. But even with that, I think to beat some of these guys, there is still a little bit more muscle that needs to be added to that frame. I think he's definitely headed in the right direction. I think a better peak will make him look a lot better than he did look. I think he can definitely improve on that look in the short term. Absolutely. Just with a little more fullness and, whatever changes they need to make there. But I don't know if I can see him beating someone like Akeem. If Akeem's, at a good level, if he comes in pretty good, I don't see him getting beat quite yet. I think he's just a little too dense and a little too muscular still. Yeah.
Yeah, and that he's got that crazy muscle maturity now. He's starting to really get greenier. And I think, Quentin, I think here's the problem with these situations. I think people don't realize how much a photo can be different to what you really look like on stage. And I feel that yeah, you can build a lot of hype in the show, but it can also build a lot of disappointment when people see you and you don't have magic light, right? And
it too, like there's sometimes when you're post workout, with a good pump, like in the gym, when you got a little more food in you, in good gym light, where you'll just look fucking crazy, like I got some shots from, preps where I look like 700 times better than I ever looked on stage,
Right.
And you're almost hesitant to post them because you're like, shit, I want to post this because I look fucking awesome, but I also don't want to post this because if I don't look this good on stage, it's like you said, it's a letdown, right? So you got to like kind of be careful with what you put out there in terms of like not setting your expectations into a form that aren't realistic. I think I could see a point in his prep where there was a turn in terms of like it looked like his body weight started to come down at a more exponential rate, which I think can be, like I said, remedied in the short term to some regard. But I still think he just, there's a difference between flatness and still some extra muscle that needs to be added on a frame. And I think he's a tall guy. He's also very long limbed, like he's got long legs, long arms, which make it even harder to kind of have everything looking filled out and really dense, in a lot of shots. So I think he'll get there, but I think he still needs a little more time to be beating some of these guys that are, Olympia top 10 guys. Yeah.
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. He's got long limbs, so he's just going to need more to fill out. And I feel that's why you got to be careful of a picture or a video or just one pose. It doesn't tell the whole story. Just like when things are really close, and this is something that a lot of people are going to understand that go to these shows. When things are really close, it's not just the shot, it's the transitions. And those are actually also judged whether or not judges want to actually really
A
I
good
like
judge will
that.
know and be mindful of it, though, for sure.
100%, because just like it can hurt you, it can help you. Because if somebody else is breathing out and during their transitions, when you're like, well, I'm not in that pose yet. So but no, it doesn't matter. You're still being judged.
Honestly,
That's
this is one of the things that, and I know for a concrete fact from speaking to the judges, was one of the biggest things that I actually just beat Hassan on last year at Toronto. You know, I definitely wasn't at my 100% best at that show. You know, it was still a decent showing, but I definitely, could have been a little better. And Hassan definitely outmuscled me in a lot of shots, but my midsection control was very good, especially in transition, and in shots like, say, in a side tricep, where it's exposed, things like that, or in the quarter turns, and I know that they really, his midsection control was very poor, and they really, really penalized him hard for it, I was definitely in better condition, sharper, and a little more balanced in certain aspects. But he was as big as they come, and his condition was still very good. So right there, like, he could have made that a lot closer show, like if that midsection had been under control, and it was mostly just in transition, not necessarily even in the shot. So just like you said, I mean, these guys are watching. And you got to really keep it under control at all times there. And, I mean, someone like Hany is a prime example of someone that is like militant with keeping his stomach like in really, really good control, in transitions and in his poses, and, how he breathes between his poses, that always stays very, very good,
Yeah, he's really good at being able to stay polished at that, because he really wants to be able to understand. Because in the beginning, he actually had some issues when he was trying to go into open. And I said, look, there's no point in going open if you're not going to be able to keep your stomach in. So that's something. And again, he works on it now all the time, but he kills his ab workouts.
Yeah.
I mean, those ab workouts.
He's known, and he's probably got some of the best developed abs in the men's open in terms of like the sharpness and depth and detail to them. So, when you can have those and really stay on them in the show between transitions and in those poses, it really can add a lot to the physique, obviously. So yeah, no, I think it's something guys definitely need to be mindful of. And like I was saying for Hassan, I think if he can control it for this Toronto, I think he can definitely be someone that can challenge for it. But it could be the same as last year, that he could have all the tools, but let one thing like that kind of go the wayside and make it a little tougher on him,
Out of all the guys that you want to be able to really think that it's going to have a breakout Olympia this year that's up and coming, who do you think that's going to be?
I mean, the immediate thought obviously goes to Martin, but look, I think Martin's an incredible bodybuilder. I think he will do well at the Olympia, but I don't think Martin's going to be like a first call out guy quite yet. I think he's on the cusp, and he's somewhere in that, 7 to 9, 10 range. So I think that'll definitely, for his first Olympia, it'll definitely be a breakout. But if I'm trying to think of someone that would, yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of have to go with him. I mean, I would still love to see.
Well, let's talk. I want to what about like an Andrew Jacked? Because I know that at the beginning you got a lot of heat about Andrew. Didn't you remember that all back?
which is crazy too, because I mean, I'm a huge fan of Andrew, and the only thing I've ever said, which I would say for anyone where it's needed to be said, is that his conditioning needs to be improved. I mean, it does. Sure. I mean, he has, since I said that, there was showings he had with better levels of conditioning.
Yeah.
But in terms of the detail and conditioning still in the glutes and hamstrings, and things like that, there still is more that I think there is to be uncovered there. I think Andrew has one of the highest ceilings there is in bodybuilding, for sure. Just his raw potential, his structure, his shape, and when you think of how long he's really been pushing things, makes him very impressive, and very, you can really be aware of how high this guy could go.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, no, I definitely think he could be, he could definitely, definitely be as high as, any of those guys up at the show. I mean, he could be challenging for top 3, top 4 spots if he can really hit the nail on the head, for sure. Challenging SAMSON, those guys up in the, top 3, top 4. So, Andrew's always very exciting to see, but yeah, that's really it. Is it? I'd just like to see a little bit higher level of conditioning. That's all,
All right. And for the last question that they asked, Do you think Chris will ever compete in the Open?
Fucking hope so. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think it would be cool for sure. I mean, I'd love to see Chris do it. It would be cool, you know, to have him do an Open show, or you know, just see him next to some of these top dogs in the Open, just to see what it looks like, you know. Do I think it'll ever happen? If I had to give one, I don't know. I don't want to start any rumors here, because if I say yes, people think that I know the answer to it and I'm saying it. If I say no, I don't want people to think that it's never going to happen. So, which way do I want to go? Do I ever think it's going to happen? Yes. Yeah. Maybe once, maybe one time we'll get Chris on it. You know, we'd see him on an Open stage, and it would be a really cool thing to see for sure. Yeah.
How do you think he would do?
Where, like in Olympia? Like,
no, both. Give me whatever. I mean, and again, this is always one of those things. What if? I definitely
think he could win an Open show. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that obviously Chris could win the majority of Open shows. You know, I think a 245-pound Chris in good condition is going to be very hard for most bodybuilders to beat, you know, with his shape and his flow and level of detail that he has. Yeah, at an Olympia level, I don't know. What do you think? Where do you think he falls in like a mental?
You know, like that's it's some, you know, people ask me, and I just don't like making, you know, predictions, and I don't like to try to sit there and do that. But I guess if you and I sat down and we're just doing what we're doing now, which is just kind of, you know, spitballing and shooting the shit, I would say let's take a look at his last two looks, right? Because those are his biggest, right? You know, those are his biggest. So with 242 pounds is his cutoff, let's just say, let's just take that look and say, well, where would you have him? Where would you have him with that look up there? You know, it's like, it's tough because you don't have him, you know, sit there next to him, and you're competing against people's virtually. And that's why when people ask me, I go, you got to be in the same light, standing next to that person at that same time. And you can sit there and come up with these virtual pose downs all day, because I see them. Sometimes I get tagged on them, you know? Like I even see them with you, and they're like Iain versus C-Bomb, where, you know, because I think that's a good comparison. Because to be honest with you, you're talking about a guy that's like, you've placed from, you know, in the top 10, and you're, you know, as high as 7th. And you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. Can that be a little bit right there?
Yeah, technically, I'm undefeated against Chris, so I'll take that to my grave. We never actually directly competed against each other, but the one show that we did do together, he was in the heavyweights and came 3rd, and I won the super heavyweights and won the overall, beating the guy that beat him in the heavyweights. So technically, I've beat Chris one time and one time only. You know,
that's funny. But I think that, like I said, you know, people ask me, I'll be like top 10. That's what I say. Top 10.
I definitely think he would be somewhere in the top 10. You know, I don't think he's going to be beating guys like, you know, in that top 3, top 4. I think there's just not quite enough muscle there for that height. But do I think he could be, you know, anywhere between, you know, 5 to 8, 9? I mean, I think that's not out of the question by any means, you know, especially like if there was a year, like if there was a bit of time where it was known, you know, like it's like, hey, we're going to do an Open show in 6 months, you know, let's put a little more size on. You can come in at, you know, 245, 248, or, you know, something like that, and have a little more size on them, you know, where you're not like worrying about the constraints of a classic cutoff, or, you know, not putting on too much weight in the off season that you're going to just have to strip off on the back end. Yeah, I mean, he definitely could be competitive at that level for sure. It'd be fun to see, 100%. Yeah, there you go. Well, we need to get him in there. Get him an invite for that. We'll get him to be the first guy to do both classes at the Olympia. He'll be in the Open and in Classic at an Olympia, doing a double class. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Derek did it with 212 and all that, but Classic, you know, nobody's done
in the same year, like in the same year. Like Derek did 212 and then moved to the Open, or like, you know, but I know like Clarita, you know, they were trying to, he was because he won an Open show, right?
Yes, he was, but they wouldn't let him do it. They said you had to pick. So they
said you got to pick one. So let's see if we can try and get Chris to be the first guy to do both in the same Olympia. How stressful would
Oh,
that be for you? Now you have fucking,
oh, dude.
Chris doing 2 classes, 3 guys, that'd be a mess. Jeez.
No, no. Derek sometimes says it. I goes, I know you're going to have Chris. He's going to do the open. I'm like, Chris is not doing the open, bro. And then he turned around and be like, no, no, no. I think he's going to do the open. I'm like,
we'd all love to see it for sure. It'd be cool. I mean, it's just as a fan of bodybuilding. I mean, we're all fans of bodybuilding. If you're a fan of bodybuilding, it's hard not to be a fan of Chris. So, to see him, he's obviously very dominant in that world that he's in classic. So, to see him with some different physiques, with some different bodybuilding physiques is just like, as a fan, you're just like curious and excited, and we'd all love to see it, I'm sure,
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where when you watch the versus videos or the pictures, you kind of always go, how do you do this? And going back to the whole situation, I want about the Lee Haney thing too. I honestly think that Lee doesn't like it. Again, I'd love to have him on the podcast because I think if you take Lee Haney now, the way he looked and just push him into bodybuilding, he would look more like a classic guy, right? I mean, and I'm, he probably is not far off on his weight either on the classic. Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's just like so negative about open because of that. Because I feel like, his body was
his physique doesn't fit into the, the mold of the current men's open guys as much as it fits into another division. So, I understand being a little critical of it, but I also think that we should, you're a former Mr. Olympian, you should be an advocate for the sport and you should be helping promote these guys. And, I think it's okay to place your critiques where it's, like me, like I'm giving, saying Andrew could do this or Nick could improve this, or, saying it as a, a critique of the sport and what I want to see from guys and as a fan. But I still love bodybuilding and I still think that we have an incredible crop of guys and that these are all incredible bodybuilders. I never have anything negative to say about bodybuilding as a whole. And I only want bodybuilding to continue to grow and be bigger and better and, continue to see more freaks and awesome physiques hit the stage every year. Right.
Yeah, and you look at the money in the bodybuilding. If it was going backwards, why would they bringing up the Arnold to $500,000 or the Olympia at the biggest prize money ever for the for the total show? There's more divisions at the Olympia, so there's a lot more money when it comes to the total amount. But but look at that. I mean, between $400,000 for first and $500,000 next year for the Arnold. I mean, all of these things are happening. So I agree with you. I think it should be all about positivity and build that up because it's a snub on the athletes.
Like I said, I think it's okay to, it's a sport that's based on critiquing physiques. So to critique physiques is okay, but there's a difference between critiquing physiques and just being like negative about the sport as a whole and about physiques. And I think some guys get lost in that, and I think a prime example was kind of like a Sean Ray, like it seemed like anything that he ever said about bodybuilding was never anything positive, and it was only to saying that his guys were better and shit on every guy. So then people over time really lost a lot of respect for his opinion in the bodybuilding space, So, I think that you need to find a healthy marriage of, giving an assessment and a fair and critical assessment of guys and not like trying to be too nice or be too mean and, being fair and honest. But also trying to promote the sport and the bodybuilders that are competing within it,
Yeah, building on positivity. Yeah, I agree. Well, were you sore for a couple of days from the workout with
my chest was for sure. Yeah.
Was it?
4 or 5 days after that. Yeah.
That was a wrist position.
Yeah, that was it. I needed that.
Yeah, that was good. It was good. But yeah, man, you got to come out. When are you coming out? Are you going to come out and train?
Yeah, I should come out and train. Whenever you get Chris at one time, you should gotta let me know. We'll come down. We'll train for a couple of days. Whoop his ass for some Olympia workouts. It would be fun to come down. So, yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed the getting to train with you guys. And obviously, being back in Canada now, I don't get to train with like any high level bodybuilders like that often anymore. Get to train with Chris, who I used to train with a lot. And you and I had never trained together, so that was a new fun experience. So. Obviously any more of those opportunities, I'll be, jumping on as fast as I can. So you let me know and I'll be out there and we'll get some good workouts in. I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk to Chris. I'll find out the next time he's going to be coming out and then we'll get together and then we'll jump on the podcast together with him. and throw something together. But man, brother, I really appreciate it. This is long overdue. I really wanted to just say thank you for taking the time out in the middle of your day. I know you're super busy, and be able to just get caught up and get your opinion on a lot of things bodybuilding related, as well as just and you know, everything that you know you're doing right now, because you're judging, you're getting involved with, you got Gym Reapers, you got stuff with Raw, you got, you know, you got so many sponsors, and you're doing so many different things. So I just want to say thank you for giving back and staying positive, because I think that's really something to look up to.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. I mean, like you said, we've been talking about this for a while, so to make it happen, to get on here and chat, you know, it's we've been having these conversations in person every time we see, and you know, shooting the shit about bodybuilding and training and all these things. So you know, get on here and have it is good, and it's long overdue, and I'm thankful to be on. So we'll definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll definitely do it again. Again, guys, thank you so much. We're going to put Iain's link below for his IG, as well as all of the other pages on his social media. Make sure you let us know what body part you want us to do the next time we get together. So, put those in the comments. And again, like, subscribe, do all the things you're supposed to do. Hany Rambod, Iain, and that's the truth.